We are live. We're live on a Monday night. It is Monday. So if it's Monday, then that means it's time for Mondays in the meditation room. Hey, welcome to another opportunity to gather as enlightened women, as a tribe. We believe here in enlightened women as we talk about midlife that this is not a season of chaos, but it is a season that we get to redefine, reimagine our lives in this most significant and sacred season of our lives. Welcome to Mondays in the Meditation Room with Dr. K. What? For Midlife Musings. That means you are not walking this journey alone. We are together. We are family. We are sisterhood. We are community as we come together to talk about this amazing season of our lives. Here in the Enlightened Woman Tribe in the Meditation Room, we are mastering midlife, and not just midlife, but mastering our midlife inner life. It's that inside part of us that helps us transition, help us to change, help us to embrace the season, help us to grow and learn and be and become the best version of ourselves possible, right? It's where we are saying that we are rediscovering the joy of being who we are. So welcome in the room. Come on. It's not too late to call a sister, text a sister, email a sister, remind her that the sisters are gathering, right? This is the space and the place for all things enlightenment and empowerment for Black women in midlife. So hey, and hey. Go ahead and say hey to your sister. Welcome. Y'all, it's sure enough fall now, right? Y'all feeling this brisk, cool weather, but the air is nice and clean. As I always say, it's my favorite time of the year. How about you? What's your favorite season? Mine is fall. I can get with spring and summer. I love it. But fall is my favorite. Until we get to that December kind of area before it turns winter, December 20th, when you got to start pulling out your boots and your hats and your gloves and your coats and your scarves. Whew. I like those days when we can then have some good comfort food like chili and soup and hot chocolate and apple cider and all that good stuff, and curl up with a good blanket, some good footies, right? And a good book or a magazine and take a nap. Now that's the best part of winter. Woo! And I'm a Cleveland girl, born and raised in Ohio. Then that's cold. That's a whole nother cold than Maryland cold. So what's your favorite season, and how are y'all doing? It's a lot going on in the world, but we have each other, and that's a good thing. We have our community, right? So yes, come on in. So tonight, as you know, we've been really trying to stick to our timing to make sure we're headed off into our nightly rituals by 8:30 or so that we can give our bodies and our minds and our spirits time to power down and relax so that we can get a good night's sleep. Why? Because we know sometimes in midlife, if you're dealing with perimenopause or menopause, or you're even sometimes postmenopausal, that insomnia kind of jumps on you and it's hard to get a good night's sleep, right? And so we like to give ourselves time to help our bodies to get to where they need to get to so we can get our sleep, because we need our sleep. Sleep is imperative. It's like drinking water, right? I'm still working on that. But sleep is. So thank y'all for joining me. So on tonight, we've just been flowing because I had a whole plan for the month of November and had even talked to some persons to be special guests, but I believe in going with the flow. and being where you are. And you can only, I think, sometimes share um, as you are experiencing life, because our life is really all that we have in our teaching and sharing moments. So, a few weeks ago, we talked about mindful endings, and then we talked about transitions, the gift of wisdom, what we learn in the midst of transition. And on tonight, I want to take a different take on dealing with loss and or grief. And so our topic tonight is called the privilege of grief. The privilege of grief. I know you might not ever think that you would put those two words together, but tonight we are, the privilege of grief. So I hope y'all hang in there with me. And I just felt led tonight to not do this by myself. And I'm so grateful that I have an amazing partner who stopped whatever he's doing to join me in the room, because whenever he joins me in the room, it elevates the conversation and the revelation. So, y'all help me welcome um, my hubby, partner in life and ministry, friend, and all the good stuff. He's cute too. Yeah, who wouldn't want to have them in the room? But welcome, my husband, the Reverend Dr. Harold Bernard Hayes Jr. in the room. I just felt like I needed to have that extra strength and spirit and joy and fun. Yep, in the room. So yay, Wakanda forever. Y'all, can I tell you? And we've been talking about that in light of also seeing Black Panther Wakanda Forever. And I won't go into any detail, but when you see it, you'll understand why I'm saying that that's even connected to what we're going to talk about tonight. So say hey to the people.
Hey to the people.
I knew he was going to do that. Hey to the people.
Thank you. Thank
Thank,
you for the invitation.
thank you for saying yes. So I want to start this out by saying, when the spirit gave me this titles, because I was just feeling some kind of way. I was here because, remember, this is my literal meditation room where I come and meet with God in the mornings or whenever. And I was here and just asking God about and praying about how I was feeling, about a lot of different things, and in particular, the recent ascension of my mother in love, really dealing, allowing myself to deal with those feelings, and thinking about conversations that we've had recently on our drive back home from Philly, and just recent conversations. And the Holy Spirit shifted me with this title. And that's what I'm saying. You're right, Crystal, when you said, yeah, wow, the privilege of grief. That's deep. It is. But it really is a paradigm shift of how we normally talk about grief and loss. That it is a privilege to grieve. It's what they call in the definition of it, special right or advantage or benefit, right? Or I even want to say a blessing, an opportunity.
Mm,
I want to use those words to grieve, a blessing, an opportunity to grieve, or the privilege to experience grief. Wow. And or sorrow. Another word for it is to sorrow, which really is an emotion. So it's a feeling, right? And in not too long ago, in one of my devotions, the author used the word perspective awareness.
mm,
In other words, being aware of the perspective that you have about a certain thing, and whether your thoughts, your ideas about something Are you aware of it? And do you need to shift and adjust? And I was like, oh my goodness. So in other words, the Holy Spirit was revealing to me that I need to be mindful of my perspective about grief and or sorrow, and to shift it, because how you perceive something, what you think about something, is how you will experience it.
Amen.
And for me, I always saw um, grief and or sorrow as an unwanted, unwelcome emotion.
Yeah.
And to begin to think differently about it, oh man, was a challenge, especially because I was right in the midst of it, right? So I realized that many of us live in an existence of futility, of avoidance. Is either the challenge of dealing with any sorrow or grief, or the futility of avoidance. And I say futility of avoidance because you can't really avoid it, because it is a part of life.
Right. Right.
So it's the challenge and futility of avoidance of it versus acceptance and embracing. Wow,
Wow.
that's a totally different perspective. What's your thoughts on what we've just shared so far?
My first thought is, how did I end up with you tonight doing it? That's
Because
that's
you love me.
because I love you. Because I love you.
Mhm,
Um, wow. So many things are rolling around in my head and heart. First of all, thank you for daring this kind of subject,
mhm,
especially at such a time as this concerning where we are.
mhm,
Um, I absolutely totally agree with the title.
mhm,
If you had presented that title to me 4 years ago,
mhm,
I would say 5 years ago, because 4 years ago my father had the stroke.
mhm,
And then for a year, we watched his health diminish. And so if you had introduced to me that concept, that approach to grief, I don't think I would be able to embrace it as I am now.
right.
Yeah. Um, when my father passed, we went into work mode, planning and preparation, and then the preaching of the eulogy. Afterwards, after October 4th,
Mhm,
I began to pay attention to myself. Excuse me, I got something in my throat, but I began to pay attention to myself and my thoughts and my feelings. Excuse me. And I noticed I wasn't able to shake it.
mhm,
And I don't even know what it was that I was trying to shake. But I thought the worst was behind me, because I had grieved my father before he actually transitioned. I grieved him because I saw his health diminishing. And my father was always iconic in my eyes, bigger than life. And so I grieved. And so after we committed his body at the interment following the celebration,
mhm,
I had the nerve to think I was good.
mhm.
And all of a sudden, Um, I was grateful that I was aware of the need for a professional,
Mhm.
uh, a counselor, somebody that could kind of walk me through it by just allowing me to talk it out.
Mhm.
And so I was, as you know, I was in counseling for a whole year.
Mhm.
And it was the best thing I could have done. And I was just grateful that I had that awareness uh, through our own journey as a married couple and
Mhm.
books we've read and workshops we've done and workshops we have attended. And
Mhm.
so I had that awareness that I needed to talk with somebody. And then I had my own son checking in on me on a regular basis because that's his field. Uh,
Mhm.
this one got me, sweetheart,
Mhm.
uh, by surprise because we were just with my mother 3.5 weeks ago,
Mhm.
laughing, talking, hugging, celebrating my brother's wedding. And so the grief, people were saying, the grief, I'm sure Pastor, I'm sure Harold, I'm sure Buddy, friend, son is the same.
Mhm.
But it's not. You grieve based upon your own relationship with that person.
That's good.
You
Mhm.
grieve based upon your relationship. Grief is directly related to your relationship
Mhm.
with that person,
Mhm.
and it's directly related to not only the relationship with the person, but how that person transitions.
Mm. Mm.
So my grief for my dad was, God, how could you let him go out like this?
Mhm.
Um, served you all his life,
Mhm.
traveled all over the world preaching your word. Now he is up in the hospital, capacitated, can barely, well, not at that point, could not talk.
Mhm.
And then when he transitioned, God, he transitioned by himself.
Mhm.
None of us had the chance to gather around his bed
Mhm.
and say our goodbyes. So that was the grief was related
Mhm.
to his. He ended up a health conscious man,
Mhm.
full of vitality and fitness, ends up having a stroke and all of the things that go along with the stroke. Textbook happened. And so my grief was not just the loss of my dad, but the losing of my dad
Mhm. Along the way.
along the way. My grief for my mother um, was, Darlene, do not tell me my mother is gone. I just saw her,
Mhm.
and I saw her in a happy state,
Mhm.
and so it was sudden from our perspective. It was sudden,
Mhm. Exactly.
and um, and so when I look at both of them, they both transition. They're 3 years apart in age, and so they both transition in the fall, your favorite season. They
Mm.
both transition at the age of 87 because of the 3 years difference. My father transitioned in 2019, and my mother transitioned 2022. And so my father transitions at 87, and 3 years later, my mother transitions at 87. They were married for 64 years before my father transitioned. Um, and so when I look at it like that, it's the privilege of grieving, though. It's a,
Mhm.
it's a privilege and an honor. They
Mhm.
live full lives, and we still will be calling their names.
Yeah,
And
that's
and and
good.
so and so yeah, and so I agree with. It's been a privilege. The word that title, that concept doesn't make it easier,
Mm-mm.
but it does put a necessary pivotal spin
Mhm.
on our perception of grief. And
Yep.
it matures us, or it's maturing me to know that this is the circle and cycle of life.
Right. We've been, I think we've lost a lot being in America, right? And being westernized or colonized because as a people, it was, I don't want to use the word celebrated, but it was treated with such sacred honor um, as a part of life,
Yes.
and and had so many rituals around it
Mm-hmm.
that helped you with it. Um, but to see it as a literal rite of passage.
Absolutely. That our faith informs us that it is a rite of passage. It is moving from life to greater life.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the thing that we have been taught in this Western way of thinking is not just about death, but about emotions and passions and expression of self. Period. It became a no or a thing you don't do. You hold things in. You don't. You got to be stoic. You got. That's your way of showing strength and all of that. And it kind of began to permeate us to a certain degree because we know how to celebrate. I mean, you go to New Orleans, they have the band marching down the street and
Yeah.
coming together and eating and celebrating the person's life. It even using the term homegoing celebration is unique to us as a people. I think that is part of what we brought with
Yeah.
us
Yeah.
culturally. And if we're not careful, we can lose that and continue to try to, avoid it, or instead of accepting and embracing it. Now, I'm not talking or making light of grief or sorrow, because there is a difference to me, I think, between it being a part of our lives and a part of living than dealing with what I would call the trauma of violence in our communities and war. That whole trauma of loss and grief is a whole different kind of thing and a whole different animal.
Yeah. 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 And I'm glad we're not dealing with that tonight.
Mhm.
Because
Not dealing
that will shift my
with
energies
the whole
totally.
energy, right? So we're doing a caveat, if you will, to say we're not minimizing those
No.
orchestrated, um, clearly cause and effect kind of things that's happening in our communities. We're not
Absolutely.
talking about that. We're talking about in the normal sense of life cycles and life and death, how we're taught to manage it. Like my cousin said, yeah, right. Don't let them see you cry. That whole thing. And then we kill ourselves emotionally and physically when we're not allowed to emote, as if that is not the right response.
Yeah,
But it
yeah,
absolutely is.
yeah. It absolutely is. I am. I'm not the same Harold Jr. I love saying that now, because I say it to honor my mother and father. They they
Mm-hmm.
they knew me as Junior, and then
Mm-hmm.
as I started getting older, they start saying Harold Jr. It wasn't until I was good and grown with children that they start just saying Harold. So I
Mm-hmm.
like going back to Harold Jr. And I am not the same Harold Jr. when my father passed, and then when my mother passed.
Mm-hmm.
I I grieved and expressed the grief through tears for a year watching my father's health diminish. By the time I got to the homegoing, I did not cry
Mm-hmm.
uh, because I said I'm cried out. And so I went into stoic, get it done mode, right? And so it wasn't until, as you remember, we got to the interment that it was a
Mm-hmm.
challenge. And I didn't really break down then, but it was a challenge to get through the committal, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and to then say my father's name.
Mm-hmm.
With my mama, he knows what I shift. I shift with my mama.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, um, my son, I will share this. Um, Sweetheart, after we came back, because it was pouring down raining at the cemetery for my mom.
Mm-hmm.
We drove, the limousine brought us back to my sister's house. So we were all getting out the car, going in, changing because we were soaking wet.
Mm-hmm.
I changed and then I was bringing our stuff back out to the rental.
Mm-hmm.
Josh saw was already at his car. He saw me putting the stuff in the car, and then I closed the trunk and we walked together. He put his arm around me,
Mm-hmm.
and I said these words, "Man, I gotta get a better thug cry," and we bust out laughing. So let me give you a platform, the context. 3 years ago, 3 years ago, our family lost it at my father's interment when I was committing the body. I mean, everybody was falling out, screaming, crying, and I'm not crying, I'm not screaming, I'm struggling to get the words. I now commit the body of Elder Harold B.
Mm-hmm.
Hayes Sr. to the ground, earth to earth. I am struggling. Literally, my brother-in-law, his hand is on in the middle of my back, so I won't, because I am literally struggling to get those words out. I get those words out. By the time I get those words out, everybody's a mess. And
Mm-hmm.
so my son says to us 3 years ago, "Man, I got to get me a better thug cry." He said, my voice just went too high for my own comfort. And so our joke was 3 years ago, a thug cry goes like this. Right. You don't really make no sound. You just, and so 3 years later, as me and my son are walking up the steps to my sister's house, his arm is around me. So I say to him the words he said to me 3 years ago, "Man, I gotta get me it," because I I did not hold back when it came to my mom. And if I had even tried, I would not been able to hold back. The grief,
Mm-hmm.
the reality that I no longer have parents on this side.
Yep. Now here's the thing. This is my story. I'm sticking to it. We were complaining about how hard it was raining, even as we were pulling up, and that the sky just opened up. I think that was mercy. I think that was God's mercy
Yeah.
because we moved so fast. There was no time for
No.
anything to happen. We you did it. We prayed. We put the flowers on, and we were all headed back to the car. And in hindsight, I want to say that was the mercy of God. We did
Hey,
not
hey,
linger
Doc,
there.
Dr. K, sweetheart, we ain't need no sunshine that day.
We
We
didn't need
need
no
they
sunshine.
dry.
We needed rain so we could get our butts out of there and get back in the car because that was
Well,
just
and you can feel everybody was like this. Oh, I'm glad that was
let's
over.
go. It was like
Let's go.
okay, that was a mercy because we would have all still been there.
Look, that was a mercy drench.
That was a mercy drench. So here's the thing, before we get ready to go, just talking and being able to allow people the space to know that their feelings are real, to validate them, that they are okay, and that the change that happens is okay. Because I think sometimes we're afraid to grieve because we know that it's going to change us. The
Yeah,
loss of certain people in our lives are going to change us, and it's okay.
it's okay. It's absolutely okay.
We're
Yeah,
never going to be the same. But
never.
grief itself and loss itself does a few things that I wrote down when I was thinking about tonight is that it refines and realigns you.
Yeah, that's good.
You refine your thought about life, about living, and you realign your priorities. It has a way of doing that to refine you and realign the things that are important, that matters, that you are spend your energy on and your time. You shift, right? And then it also, if we let it, allow us to just integrate it into our living experience.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, and you and I have had so many wonderful, rich conversations about menopause and andropause,
Mhm.
and between menopause and andropause. Check this out, sweetheart. We don't give a pause. That I
Yeah.
was so we, y'all get what I'm saying. We're at a place because chemically speaking, we are changing,
Mhm.
right? Where we are no longer, we're learning how to no longer major in the minors and
Mhm.
minor in the majors. And
Mhm.
we're focusing in on what really matters in life now. That's just through our chemical change that's happening. When you go through the loss of a loved one,
Mhm.
the loss of a parent, the
Mhm.
loss of a spouse, you really, the combination of your aging gracefully
Mhm.
and the reality that there is a lifetime, a
Mhm.
time of life, a
Mhm.
season that will not on this earth last forever for you or
Mhm.
for your loved ones,
Mhm.
you really do realign
Mhm.
as you are being refined
Mhm.
in a way that I mean you become an expert at stuff that just don't matter.
Yep. Yep.
You become masterful at nope. Did y'all get that? You become masterful at nope. Uh,
Yep. I love science said it redefines who you are without your parent or parents. And we don't have that conversation. That's why I think this conversation and all of our conversations in the meditation room and all of our conversations when we're dealing with couples in midlife is that we don't talk about the things we need to talk about. And it takes courage to talk about that in midlife and around this time. And it's true. It happens to some people much earlier in life, but in general. So we're talking about
in general, right?
that you do have to find your footing because there will come a time when you are alive without your parents. Then you have to really rediscover who you are.
You're absolutely right. It blows me away, and I appreciate what Sonya is saying. It blows me away because before my parents transitioned, they didn't have their parents with them anymore,
And
right?
we didn't even have the presence of
We didn't even have
that conversation. What is that like for you?
we did not have the presence of mind to say, Dad and Mom, what's that like for y'all now, right? And I'm just going along in life. I already have the proof that people pass, people move from this life, and they move on.
Mm-hmm.
And I had parents that have parents that are no longer there,
Mm-hmm.
right? And why was I not more prepared? Why did I? What was wrong with me? And so now, many of us are now in that same space that we forgot to recognize our parents were without their parents.
And how about it is happening for us collectively
Yep,
in this midlife age? Because how about we're watching the new stand-up of Deion Coles,
I was
and
going to bring that up.
he's
Woo,
done, and then he comes back and says, "Real talk,
real talk.
y'all think that comedians and entertainers and stuff don't go through stuff, but he said, I'm up here in the midst of going through, as having just buried my mother,
A
and I
year ago
was a child, and a year ago to that night that he was
to
doing
that night.
ordinance, was her death, and he was talking about being in pain and feeling the fact that he no longer had a parent because he didn't know his father at all, and what that felt like to no longer have a parent and to have to keep moving forward.
That's right. I was told that when my father passed, that Harold, you will never ever be the same again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now that both have passed, um, you can just underline it twice.
Mm-hmm.
I will never get over them passing, but
Mm-hmm.
I will get through it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And now I'm more awoke and awake and alert. And I'm texting my children, for the last couple of days. I've been like, have y'all gotten y'all physicals? Y'all need to know your blood work. I'm coming back around December 1st to check to make sure you're checking in with your doctors, and then I'll check again on January 1st. In fact, and this is why I text tonight early. I will keep on checking behind y'all until y'all tell me what adjustments you have to make, major or minor adjustments to have optimal health.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm at now. My 5-year-old granddaughter Daria stopped by the house today. Our mother came by real quick, and Daria, just looks at me and says, uh, I don't want you to pass."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Huh? I don't want you to pass." She says, "How old was uh, your parents when they passed?" And I told her 87. Do you know what that little girl said to me?
Mm-hmm.
She says, "How old are you?"
Woo! She was trying to figure it out.
She's trying to figure it out. I say, "I'm 60." She says, "Listen to this, y'all." She then says, 60 is close to 70. Yeah. 70 is close to 80. Yes. 80 is close to 90. She's figuring out.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want you to pass. She then says, I, and I don't want to pass. And I want you to just live here. And she pointed in our house. She's placing her hand on it. So I just want you to live here forever.
Mm-hmm.
And all I kept saying was, baby, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I just hugged her and kissed her
Yep.
and kissed her and hugged her
Yep.
and kept saying, I understand.
What
But
you also did was normalized having a conversation about it. You didn't make her feel any kind of way.
Nope.
When we're uncomfortable with it, what we'll say, we ain't talk about that. Be quiet, girl. And then we create what
Anxiety and anxiousness
anxiety
around it.
and pathology around.
Yeah.
But you gave her the freedom to talk to you about it and say something about it, and you normalized the conversation about it, right? It's not going to make it easier for her, but she knows that that's a part of life,
Yeah.
and there should be a certain timing. And the fact that that means that you have already had such an impact on her life in 5 short years that she would grieve. But we normalize then
Wow.
to be in relationship with those we love, that that's a part of life. And if that, and when that happens, we get the privilege
Mama.
of grief
Yeah.
because it's a part
It's
of.
a part of life.
So the
Wow.
final thing, because we're gonna look, this has to be another part 2 or part 3 or part 4 or part 5, right? As we close out, everybody want to share with you just a whole world out there that sometimes being in the church can make it more difficult to embrace the sacred and sanctity of the final rite of passage, because we're so used to being taught to pray people to stay here.
Yeah, you said something, and I have experienced a transition myself, where now I offer people who I'm ministering to, would you like for me to provide a prayer of transition for your loved one while you because you just got the message they're in hospice, or you just got the message, gather everybody. And I would like to hear what your response was that first time you heard me say that to one of our members.
I was clutching my pearls. I was like, what? No, that's not what we say. We say in Jesus' name, heal him, raise him up from the sick bed, Lord. Let us believe you and trust you now. What? And there's a time and place for that, but that's why you have to have a relationship with spirit, so spirit can say, this is what I'm doing. And
Yeah,
this does not mean that God is not faithful, that God is not able, that God is not God, or that God is doing something against us.
yeah. Everybody that Jesus healed and everybody that Jesus raised from the dead died again.
Whoop.
And and so and the end of that story, after Dr. K was clutching her pearls, the member responded just like Dr. K and said, "No, we're believing for my mother to be healed." I said, "Okay, that's fine, no problem. I'll pray according to what you're believing God for. I was just offering you that."
Mhm.
What happened, sweetheart? Later on that day,
She transitioned.
she transitioned. Later on that day, I finally got back in touch to give my condolences. The member said, "Pastor, I should have allowed you to pray that prayer of transition." And I said, "That's okay. You weren't there yet."
And
And
it's
that's
okay.
and it's okay.
None of it is about guilt or condemnation.
None of it.
This is about us growing to that place that we can walk in it completely differently, because a lot of times we spend more time trying to um, challenge or deal with the futility of avoidance, that we miss
Wow.
journeying with them
Right.
on this inevitable part of the journey.
Yeah. And I have to give credit where credit is due, because Marvin Glenn, who used to be a member of Hunter, now Real Power, when we went to go see our good friends, Barbara and Marvin, as Marvin was in the process of transitioning, I asked Marvin when we were there at their home, I said, "How would you like for me to pray for your father?" He said, "A smooth transition." And I just looked. I had never heard that kind of faith.
Mhm.
Pastor, please pray. His father's still talking. His father can still recognize us and our voices. But he knows his father's in transition. And he says, I just want you to pray for a smooth transition for my father.
Mm-hmm. And that's a whole nother level of existence. Because once the journey
Wow.
starts, the journey starts.
Once it starts, once the body begins to naturally shut down
Mm-hmm.
to allow the exit of the spirit to return back to God, it has begun.
When we begin to embrace that. So as we close, I want to tell y'all, are y'all aware that there is a whole community of people that are trained to walk with you in this journey with your loved one as they're transitioning? I told Pastor, I heard of birth doulas, which are um, coaches, for lack of a better term, to walk with the mother as she prepares to deliver and during deliverance. So, not necessarily they're different than a midwife. They literally are your support, your coach, your teacher. They walk with you. They show you um, how to give birth. A birth doula. Did not know that death doulas existed and have a whole
Death
organization
doulas.
and training to walk with you and teach you how to journey sacredly and peacefully and sometimes even joyfully with your loved one as they make this final rite of passage.
Yeah,
Man, that thing right there.
yeah, yeah. That was a whole. When you share that with me, that was a whole uh, level up of awareness
Mm,
when it comes to. Um, I like I like how you put that. When it comes to giving yourself permission to joyfully journey with
mhm,
your loved ones and to joyfully journey when it's time for you to transition.
mhm.
Yeah.
Woo!
Wow.
Wow. We just gonna, it's not that we don't have more, we just gonna stop right here.
Yeah, it's time to just pump the brakes for a second. Woo.
Like the embrace the mystery of life, just like we have to embrace the mystery of death, because we don't understand it all. And that's why we believe in a God that does and trust.
Wow. Hmm.
Whew. Thank y'all
Oh,
for joining us on tonight. This was one for the books, one for the ages, and it's something that we need to continue to do and do it in community. And that's
yeah.
what our ancestors taught us, that it's a communal thing. It's not a by yourself thing, you on your own and don't nobody care and don't nobody come. No, this is a communal community
Yeah.
thing. We do it together. That's why the pandemic was so hard on us.
Mm-hmm.
We lost that
I
opportunity for a
yeah,
season
that's right.
to
Lost a lot of people, but didn't have the opportunity to celebrate
mhm, the
yeah,
way we normally do.
the way
So
we normally. Yeah.
mhm. But
Wow.
we're coming back slowly but surely, because this season was also a season of grief and loss that we're dealing with, because it's not just a loved one. It's a
Mm,
way of life, a way of being, it's dreams, it's relationships, it's transitioning from one season, your body, the whole 9 yards.
right.
So we hoping for last season's body, but we in this season's body, and we got to grieve that and do all of that, and the whole 9 yards. So thank y'all for joining us on tonight, and it is a conversation that we are going to continue to have so that we can walk in freedom and liberty and power as we master this season of our lives, and more importantly, master that midlife inner life. I love y'all. Thank you. And we will see you again on Mondays in the meditation room. Love you. Bye.